we're officially live on YouTube for the Tuesday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show. Today, we're talking about end of the year money moves. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. With me, as always, the man that I affectionately call GC, because he's got the genius concepts, because he knows how to generate cash flow, because his name is great co-host, and his parents called him Gregg Cohen.
Are you going to tell me to say hello?
Say hello, Greg.
I only move when you say go.
I know.
Okay.
I'm like Geppetto out here. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Great to be with you.
Good to have you here, buddy. And it's good to have our community manager, the one that we call MTM, because she brings the moments that matter, and because her name is Madison the Magnificent. Say hello, Madison.
Hello, everybody.
And, we're live on YouTube. So if you're watching live on YouTube, love having you. I'd love to see you interact in the comments. But even better is if you could go to nyais.com, join us live right now, or even if you're listening on the podcast and you want to join us live here in the future, this is the best way to do it because you get to be part of the community and you get to be part of the what you see.
The roll call, baby.
The roll call, baby. All right, we got Lee Bishop kicking us off saying hello, everyone. We got Dean Curry checking in saying good afternoon, everyone. We got John Henning, our leadoff hitter, saying good afternoon, batting in third today. We got Leslie Wilson is back. Greetings from Denver. Good to have you, Leslie. Who else we got in here? We got the ringmaster of the Not Your Average Investor Show community. We got Drew Barnhill in the house saying good afternoon. We got the patriarch and matriarch of the first family of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, Ken and Carolyn Moline.
We salute,
you. I forgot to call Lee Bishop the MVP. I didn't give him his due credit over there.
The MVP.
He's the MVP. Just batting first today. No big deal. We got Tony D in the house. Anthony Ditta from South Florida checking in with us. We got the man that everyone knows. Who's that?
Noah Randari.
Noah Randari. Greetings from California to Noah. Who else we got here in the house? Checking in. The esteemed Sir Peter James wishing us from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Tip of the cap to you, sir. Wishing us a top of the afternoon from the amazing Commonwealth of Virginia. This is T. Peter James. Greetings from the illustrious Pablo and the amazing Madison. GC is phenomenal.
Wow. That's just throwing it right back at us.
That's why we call him Sir Peter James. We also got Hervé Francois saying, what up, fam? From Jersey, Hervé is in the house. Good to have you, Hervé. We got Bill Shields. We haven't seen him in a while with his trademark. Buenas tardes, amigos. Buenas tardes, Bill Shields. We got David Blattner checking in from beautiful Massachusetts. Misty Johnson checking in, past star of the show. Misty, good to have you on board.
Absolutely.
From Colorado as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got Gene Ferreter in the house. Gene normally says Gene Ferreter here, but today it's implied.
You can read a lot into that.
It's implied.
He just knows he's within presence of family.
I got it. And we got our regular Rosalind Riley. Good morning, everyone, from Marietta, California. Good morning, Rosalind. Good to have you back as well. GC, let's get right back to it. When I hear end of the year money moves, I think of my financial advisor calling me up and be like, hey, man, if you made an extra like $50,000 to $100,000, you got some stuff to do. Mm-hmm. Is this a show only for people that have absolutely crushed it this year and have an extra $100,000 lying around? What are we talking about today?
No, it's absolutely not just a show for people who have an excess amount of capital that they're sitting on. This might be the end of the year, and that's why we titled the show End of the Year Money Moves, but this is a really important time to think about where you're putting your money, regardless if you had a gangbusters year last year. You absolutely crushed it. You were one of the few in the stock market where your investments did well, or maybe didn't lose a lot. Or if you are somebody who, has really, unfortunately, financially taken a beating this year, if your investments have not done well, you have an opportunity to do some things right now that can really set you up for success, not just right now, not just for next year, but in the years to come. And then the reason why there's a little bit of a sense of urgency here is because there are some things we're going to talk about on the show today that can really set you up for success next year and in future years. But there's some things that you can do right now that you do get actual tax savings, some additional benefits from right now if you make these moves before the end of the year. So this is not a message just for folks that are sitting on a lot of capital. This is for anybody who is looking to make the best decision with their money right now, and then sprinkle on a little bit of added incentive in the form of some extra tax savings coming your way.
Well, I'm interested. All right. So one of the things that you talked about, right? Like end of the year urgency is usually driven by this idea that there's certain things you can do in taxes that you can lock in so that next year's tax return is a little bit better.
Absolutely.
Right? Let's start from the top, just as an asset class, rental properties. Mm-hmm. We talk about tax savings as one of the 5 profit centers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cash flow, tax savings, home price appreciation, debt pay down, and inflation hedging.
Very good.
I haven't had to list those in a while.
Don't hurt yourself. I saw it. It was like
there was a grimace in my face. That was a grimace. A little. Tax savings. Let's just spend a little bit of time right now just talking about what are the, first of all, hello, Erin O'Neill. She's into the lights.
Into the lights.
Erin O'Neill is in the house. Oh, and Marilyn Kahneman from Homosassa, Florida is
That's
here.
the home of the manatees.
And the better Greg is here. Greg Stone. Howdy from New Jersey.
Now I feel good.
Good to have you back. Let's talk about tax savings as it relates to rental properties. Explain that profit center.
Yeah, tax savings. Gosh, I just love tax savings.
I
I
know.
mean, anytime I get the opportunity to just think about tax savings, talk about tax savings, you see this big smile on my face. I'm the only one in America, I feel like, when you say the word taxes, I like lean in and I'm excited about it. And it's because rental properties are this asset class that just have these incredible tax advantages that no other asset class has. And you don't have to have a special license or you don't have to have a special accreditation to be able to take advantage of them. You literally get to take advantage of them by buying an asset and holding on to it. And so we'll kind of just level set just the things that you're able to write off as a rental property investor, right? You know, in most other asset classes, and let's just compare it to other asset classes, you know, in most other asset classes, you don't have income coming in. But if you do have income coming in, there's nothing to offset that. Like, for example, if you're one of the very few in the stock market and you get dividend income, you don't have something to offset that dividend income, you know, unless you have other losses from the stock. But there's nothing just inherent that you get to write off for that dividend income, you know. And in rental properties, you get all of this income that comes in on a monthly basis, right? You might have, you know, call it $1,500 a month that comes in from rent, right? Let's talk gross rents, right? So over 12 months, that's $18,000 for the year. You got this $18,000 coming in, but it's not like you pay taxes on $18,000. Whereas if for some reason you had an $18,000 dividend coming in the stock market, you pay taxes on that $18,000 dividend, right? So in rental properties, you have this, call it $18,000 of income that comes in, but you do not pay taxes on that $18,000. You have all of these write-offs that are just built into this asset class. So you get to write off things like your interest that you pay on your loan.
Let me stop you real quick. $18,000 of income. You're just talking about rent collection.
Yeah, that's all I'm talking about.
Okay. So revenue is rent collection.
Yeah.
For this subject right now, right? Like before you were talking about a dividend from a stock is the revenue you make on a stock, the cash flow you make on a stock.
Sure.
Revenue from a job, right? A W-2 employee.
Right.
That's the income.
Yeah.
When it comes to rental properties, income equals rent collection.
100%. 100%.
Go on, good sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, let's just stop it there. Like, it's not just this like expectation that well, let me say it another way. In other places, when you make a certain amount of income, revenue from an asset or from your job, you're expected to pay taxes on it, right?
Yep.
You know, in rental properties, you don't have that same expectation. You make this revenue, but you're not expected to pay taxes on it because you get to write off so many things that are a part of that process for you to collect that revenue.
Got it.
You know, so one of the biggest expenses for you will be your interest that you pay on your loan. Write that off.
Okay.
Just write that off.
I'm interested in that.
Okay. Property taxes might be, you know, $3-4 grand for the year. Write that off, right? That's reducing that income that you made, right? Write that off. Insurance costs, write that off. Your property management costs, write that off. You know, travel to go and view your properties, travel to come and, you know, manage your property manager here in a lovely place like Jacksonville, Florida.
Manage your property manager on the beach in Jacksonville.
You know what?
Or St. Augustine.
There's right ways to do it to make sure that it's
Yeah.
IRS approved, to make sure that you can come down here and visit us on like one of our client tours, which we actually offer to foot the bill for clients, and come down here and, you know, sit down, have a great conversation. We take you on a client tour. You check all the boxes that the IRS needs you to do, and you get to stay down here and maybe enjoy some time with your family as well. That can be a write-off as well for you. Again, I'm not a CPA. Work with a CPA, right? Do your due diligence, but I'm showing you that is absolutely a way that you can write things off. Repairs that come along the way, right? Write that off. Things that you had to fix, you know, to get the home into great rental shape. geez, there's a number of other ones that I'm probably just not off the top of my head saying right now, but there are so many write-offs that happen just as a part of this process. And what happens is that $18,000 of rental income that you had, that might be completely offset, or the vast majority of that is offset by the things that I was talking about right there, which is just, there's no like, accounting finagling. This isn't like creative things we're talking about here. This is like accounting 101. To be able to write these things off. You could do a Google search right now and there's 1,000 articles that'll tell you the same thing I'm saying. Like, this is not new. And so just the simple fact that we have this income that we earn in this asset class and we have these expenses that are able to be written off allows us to pay a lot less taxes than we would pay in most other asset classes for the same amount of income we would earn. Just there. And I haven't even gotten to the best one yet.
Got it. I'm not an expert at financial accounting, but it sounds like a lot of this stuff is almost like cost of goods sold, right? Like a lot of this stuff is just kind of like money you're putting into the property, you can write off from the revenue that you're getting from the property. And that's all kind of like within that transaction.
I would say it's cost of goods sold and your operating expenses.
And operating expenses.
Right.
Okay.
Like, because, your property management services for you.
Yep.
Right. That's kind of like your team for you. Write those off.
Got it.
Right. It's a business in itself. And I think that's a really great way to look at it. Right. It's cost of goods sold and operating expenses. Get to write them off.
Got it. We've got a Q&A in the chat. So we're experimenting with a new thing. When we send out these text reminders, we're including a link. And when you join in with that link, you join in as not your average guest.
Love it.
If you want, you're able to change your name so that we know who we're talking to. But for now, let's refer to not your average guest. Has a question in there that says, do these write-offs carry forward?
Yeah. So what this not your average guest is asking is they're saying, well, what if you have more write-offs than income this year? Do you lose the write-off? Is it use it or lose it? Or does it carry forward? Meaning next year, let's say that you have more income than write-offs. Could you use the write-offs that you got last year as well as the write-offs you get next year to offset even more income? And the answer is yes. It's a beautiful thing.
Got it. So to contextualize that, that's like, I have a really expensive turn this year and it makes my cash flow negative this year. I write off all of that cash flow that happened. And then on top of that, I get to get it for next year.
Exactly.
Cool.
If you have more write-offs than income, you don't lose it. You still have those write-offs to be used in a future date to offset other income. Okay.
So that's operating expenses and cost of goods sold write-offs, right? Money that we're putting in, we get to discount it from the revenues that we're getting out. You said that there was a better thing, GC. I think I know where you're going with this.
So the only downside to the write-offs that I've been talking to you about have been that you actually have to spend the money to get the write-off. And let's just take a minute just to live in that statement right there, because we all love write-offs. Like, there's entire strategies that are written about how can I get more write-offs? Like, when you are thinking about your personal taxes, like, oh man, what can I write off? Right? I can write off my kids, and other things, right? I can write off, charity things that we do. We're always looking for write-offs and we love write-offs. But at the end of the day, for write-offs, you actually have to spend the money and then you get to write it off. Like, what if you could think of a world where you could just write it off, but you didn't have to actually spend the money?
Sounds like a world I want to live in.
I love that world. Right? That would be an incredible world. Like, how different would you think of some type of tool or asset that would allow you to literally get write-offs without having to spend the money that year?
Go on.
That would be a game changer. What if it was literally writing off like $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 of stuff, but you didn't have to spend that $4,000, $5,000, or $6,000? Like, how crazy awesome would that be?
I want to get crazy awesome right now, GC. Go on.
Yes, I know. I'm like excited myself every time I think about
your veins are popping out.
I love this, right? That's what you get with something called depreciation in rental property investing. Depreciation from a tax perspective, not talking about market value here, just calling about depreciation. It's this beautiful thing. And I'm not a CPA, like I mentioned, so I don't know if this is the right term, but I'm calling it a non-cash write-off, right? It is something I don't have to spend money on, but I get to write it off and it offsets real income for me.
Explain that.
So in depreciation, what the IRS allows you to do is it says, listen, you bought a property is made up of land and a building on it. Well, we know over time that building is going to depreciate, that things are going to break in that building. Over time, that building will wear down. And they came up with a number of years that it takes to fully depreciate the building. It's 27.5 years.
Okay.
So they're saying, listen, if you take the value of your building and you divide that by 27.5 years, we're going to let you take that right off in that year, like in the first year, right? Your first year will be 1/27.5 of the value of the building. And you don't actually have to fix anything in order to get that write-off. You don't have to actually pay for anything in order to get that write-off. You get it because the IRS agrees that over time, your building will go down in value, and they do it on a straight line value.
Okay.
So you can have a brand new construction home, and in your first year, you will have a write-off of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 because that is 1/27.5 of the value of the building. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
okay.
Basically, you're taking the price of the house and dividing it by 27.
Close. You're taking the market value of the home price.
Market value of the home.
Subtracting the land value.
Subtracting the land value.
You're getting the building value.
The building value.
And then go.
Got it. Okay. So you subtract the land value from the cost of the home itself. And then you divide that by 27. And that means that amount you get to write off.
Write off.
Just write it right off.
Write it off. Isn't there like a Seinfeld skit about how much you love write-offs?
There's actually there's a show called Schitt's Creek that the son is like working at this like consignment store and learns about write-offs because he starts like managing the money, and then he just starts buying all sorts of crazy stuff. He's like, it's a write-off. It's a write-off. But this is different. This is great. Cool. All right. So you get to write that piece off. That is the non-cash thing, right? Because you're already in on this asset, it's yours, but every single year you get to write that piece off without having to put any extra money in.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
It's a beautiful thing.
That is a beautiful thing. We got a question here from Anonymous Attendee asking, hello, thanks for this valuable session. Can you talk about tax savings for W-2 employees due to rental properties or other options? So how does this apply to the W-2 employee? I feel like when people think about write-offs, they're thinking about full-time real estate investors and whatnot. Everything that you're talking about, does this apply for a W-2 employee?
Everything I'm talking about applies to a W-2 employee. If you happen to be a real estate professional, it only gets better than what I've just been talking about, because what we're talking about are your passive gains and your passive losses. So when you actually think about taxes, it's not all together. There's your active income and your active losses, and then there's your passive income and your passive losses. And so for our clientele who is passive, everything I'm sharing with you right now about these incredible write-offs and about depreciation is just for passive. It is just for passive, which means you can be a W-2 employee doing whatever it is you do for your W-2 employee. That's your active income. Your passive income and your passive losses, your passive gains and your passive losses are completely something separate. And you get to take advantage of everything I've just talked about, regardless of your W-2 status. It is sort of the bare minimum of the tax savings you get in this asset class. And as I mentioned, if you are a real estate professional, then you might even have the opportunity to offset some of your passive, some of your rental property losses against some of your active income, which only makes this better.
Awesome. Well, let's talk. All right. I got a couple questions, and then I want to get into this idea of end of year money moves, right? Because right now we're just explaining the asset class. The man everyone knows, Noah Randari, asks, don't you think writing off too much may affect you if you need to get another loan? How would that work?
Oh, that's a really good question. So where Noah's coming from is, let's say that you're a business owner and that's your active income. And you have the choice to pay yourself however much of a salary you're going to pay yourself. And then you're going to have the choice of how much loss you're going to take in, let's just say, in the first few years of business. Many businesses take losses in their first few years. And Noah's saying, well, geez, if I take all of these losses, is that going to hurt my ability to get a loan, because the bank would then look at your adjusted gross income, which is largely comprised of your active income. And they'd say, listen, we're not going to give you a loan because you took all of these losses.
Got it.
Okay. Again, this is a separation of active versus passive.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an overwhelming number of passive losses, like we're talking about here, write-offs. This is getting to Noah's question. He said, well, should I still take all these losses, these write-offs? The losses that we're talking about, Noah, are just on your rental properties, which is your passive losses. Those passive losses do not go onto your active losses. And so what would happen is, in the short answer to your question, there would be no reason to not take these passive losses. You know what? I should probably hedge that a little bit.
Okay.
There may be a reason you should talk to your CPA, but it is very unlikely to me that you would have write-offs you could take for your rental properties and not write those off. And the reason is because if you write those off and you just don't use them for that year, it doesn't negatively affect your active income. It doesn't affect your adjusted gross income on the active side, which is what your lender would be looking at in order to qualify you for a loan. Now, is there a reason why you may not take all the passive losses? Sure. But in general, what you're going to be doing is just stacking up passive losses. And those will be there for you when you need them, should not affect your ability to generate a loan, unless, it will not have a substantial effect on the ability for you to generate income on the active side, which would be what the lender is probably looking at when they're qualifying you for a loan.
Got it. Okay. So
I know I kind of got in the weeds there.
no, it's cool, because I'm sure Noah got a lot of value out of that. For us regular folk over here, if you are a W-2 and you have your own income, that's not going to hurt you, right? Like, you can take all the write-offs you're ever going to want, because your W-2 is essentially what qualifies you for.
Let me qualify that a little bit. Any write-off that you're able to take to offset, it's just offsetting the passive.
It's offsetting the passive anyways.
So, like, for example, if you didn't take the write-off on the passive side, you would have more passive gains then. Passive gains would transfer over to your active side, and you, in theory, be more qualifiable for a lender.
Okay.
In theory.
Okay.
That's a relatively small amount of your income, of which your active income will probably be a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty hefty price to pay. You're paying a lot of additional taxes for a very small marginal benefit of additional income to qualify you for that loan. It's probably the best way to say it.
Got it. Okay. We have a ton of questions. I love this, man. And you're not the only one getting pumped up about taxes out here, GC. Not your average guest is asking, wait, is depreciation based on purchase value or market value? You explained that depreciation is you subtract the land value from there's the value of the physical home that is built, and the land value. You take the land value out, you take the value of the home that is built. Are you using purchase value or market value?
The simplest answer is those are the same when you buy that property that year. If you're buying it, from a vertically integrated provider like JWB, you're buying it for market value. So that's the simplest answer. I would encourage you to work with your tax professional if you've owned the property for a number of years. If there's been something significantly different than, if you bought that property way under market value, those things could be different. So that's one that I would encourage you to work with a tax professional to understand if that number should be different. But for the vast majority of all of our clients who are listening and watching, you bought that property at market. Well, for all of our clients, you bought that property at market value. So for the vast majority of folks listening here, those will be one and the same. Purchase price will equal market value.
Got it. Okay. And then Raj, there's a couple questions here I'm going to save till a little bit later, but Raj is kicking in here. Raj, good to see you, man. When banks are calculating DTI ratio, they add back income and depreciation for calculations. So effective DTI, debt to income ratio, looks better than actual debt to income ratio.
Yeah, it's great.
What does that mean?
Let me read that. I think when banks are calculating debt to income ratio, they add back income and depreciation for calculations. There you go. So effective debt to income ratio looks better than actual debt to income ratio. So what he's saying is that, again, there would be very, very little reason, not one that I can really think of right now, to not take the write-offs for your rental properties, is what he's saying.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Let's move into these end of year money moves, GC. If you are somebody that's going to buy a property for the first time and you can squeeze it in before the end of this year, I imagine you get all this type of stuff. Lee says it sounded better when Greg said it, Pablo.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, appreciate it, buddy. I think he said that personally. Lee, I didn't tell anybody there. So what would be the reason, apart from this stuff that's always available, right? What would be the reason is it a money move to add a property to your portfolio before the end of this year?
Well, let's put ourselves in the shoes of some folks who are listening to this right now. We need to think about what we're doing with our money. It's not always just about the best return or whatnot. It's the best risk-adjusted return compared to my alternatives. That's your job as an investor right now. And for most people right now, your alternatives are not looking so good, right? Stocks, bonds, and putting your money under a mattress are the three things that Americans largely know how to do.
Yeah.
And so for the stock market, you've already lost a significant amount, call it 25% from the peak earlier this year. And, the prospects of what the stock market is looking like going into a recession.
According to Jamie Dimon, right? And unemployment hasn't hit yet. We have not seen the worst of this. We've already lost all this money, but the bottom is going to fall out here soon.
Yes.
Right.
It is not always so clear. You do not always see so many economists, so many industry leaders saying that there is going to be a recession. It's not always so clear. The Fed doesn't come out and say, we're going to raise rates regardless of job losses and that people need to brace for some pain in the economy. It's not always so clear that there's going to be a recession. In a normal recession, the average bear market has a 36% loss. We've only lost 25%. And those other bear markets, those normal bear markets, it's not always so clear that you've got pain coming. So you should be asking yourself, with my money in certain asset classes, how is that asset class prepared to withstand a recession coming forward?
Yeah.
And so the stock market is not prepared to withstand a recession. Well, historically has not, and is feeling a lot of pain right now. Also doesn't have income coming in. Anyways.
Got it.
Thoughts before we go to the next one?
Yeah. So right now you are speaking to me if I am, number one, if I have money in the market, or number two, I'm about to get a bonus, right? What am I going to do with this bonus?
What am I going to do?
What am I going to do with this bonus?
What am I going to do with this bonus? I'd love to be that guy. I'd probably say it that way. If I'm help a New Jersey accent.
Hey. Okay, cool. So that's what we're talking about in general.
I think your financial advisor from the beginning of the show also is the same guy who got a bonus here.
So,
go into this.
Hey, you're going to put in your IRA. All right, continue.
All right, so we're trying to figure out, why does this message matter right now, and how can you use this message to help yourself out, right? Think about which asset classes are not prepared to do well. Bonds, okay? As the Fed continues to raise interest rates like it is, that has that has a direct effect on the borrowing costs for all Americans as consumers, and also businesses. Businesses are less profitable if you hold everything else constant because it costs more for them to borrow. Now, the way that affects a bond is that, when the Fed raises rates, that means that your bond yield should go up. Because when the Fed sets a rate, all other investments basically are affected. And if the yield from the Fed funds rate goes up, then government bonds will go up, depending on how long they're going to be borrowing your money. So what that means is that's why you've seen the Fed's increases lead to substantial increases in bond yields. You would think that that's a good thing for bonds, right? A yield just means it's like your dividend. It's like your cash on cash returns, the same thing. You would think that that's good, except bond yields are still too low to help you win against inflation.
Yep.
So right now, bond yields might be between 4% to maybe 6%, which you might think, well, that's better than what they were for the last few years because they were next to nothing for the last few years. But inflation is still 8.2%.
Okay.
So when you're thinking about bonds, it's really hard to get excited to go into an investment and say, I'm going to earn 4%. Inflation's 8%. I'm really losing 4% on my money to go there. But the thing that many people are not thinking about when it comes to bonds is that people like bonds because they're simple, easy, and they're liquid.
Yep.
Right now, liquidity is really being challenged in the bond market. And it's because as yields go up as fast as they have, prices of bonds go down in lockstep. That's how these things work.
Yep.
So that's why you're seeing bonds are in a bear bonds market for the first time since they've been tracking these indices.
This is what they talk about with like the inverted yield curve, right? Or am am I inserting something that I just heard and now I'm like playing armchair quarterback?
A little bit.
Okay, then forget that. Forget I said that.
That's something cool to talk about. Maybe we'll have some time today, or maybe even a future show.
Yeah.
Because that also leads people to believe that we're going to a recession.
Mm-hmm.
So bonds don't look good, and you like bonds because they're liquid. But if you think that rates are going to stay high or go higher, that means that you think bond prices are going to go low or stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you can like sell this thing in the short run and, get out for what you had into it. And so bonds are not set up well while the Fed is jacking up interest rates. Bonds are not set up well right now.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you're that guy who's like, hey, I got a bonus now, right?
Yeah.
I got a bonus.
Yeah, I was just gonna lock it in on this bond.
I'm gonna figure out what to do with this bonus.
Yeah.
Well, in the stock market, it's not looking good right there.
Stock market's not looking good. Bonds not looking really particularly great. Is there tax savings to the bond? Like, is there a reason to like do it by end of the year for going into a bond or anything like that? Is there any other upside there?
Not by the end of the year, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And maybe our audience who will share something there. There's tax advantaged bonds, but there's not an urgency. It's not like you do that by the end of the year and you get to take a huge write-off because you have that tax-free municipal bond or something like that. So no, I don't see any reason, any urgency to put your money in bonds right now.
Got it.
And then, the other option that most people are aware of, but most average investors, they put it in cash, which is the same thing as I call putting it on your mattress. And really, it's kind of the same thing as putting in the bank right now because the bank's still not paying anything.
Yep.
So if you do that, you're just going into this investment world and you're saying, listen, I'm going to be average. And average right now is cutting my losses. I'm just going to go into this investment expecting to lose 8%.
Yeah. You're going to lose 8% year over year to like sit out and wait for the stock market to take a dive of like 30% to then get in at like then buy low and try to time the market is essentially
really good.
Is essentially what you're really trying to do, right?
That's the best strategy that people can come up with. Although it's been proven that people do not know when the bottom of the market is.
Yeah.
It's incredibly hard to time it, and there's more losers than winners with that strategy.
Okay. So then talk to me, GC. So then if we're talking about by end of year and you have this money, is the move to put it in an IRA and then make these decisions? Is the move just to go into these decisions? Can you talk to me, right? Because my financial advisor is like, hey, end of year, IRA, you're going to maximize your thing over here, right?
Well, let's talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Let's juxtapose what we were just talking about versus making the decision with the gentleman who has the bonus and wants to know what to do with it, or the lady who has the bonus and wants to know what to do with it, compared to the decision to invest in rental properties by the end of the year.
Okay.
All right. This could be that you have a bonus, or this could be just analyzing your money in the stock market and you're saying, listen, do I want to be in for the next bottom and the next bottom and the next bottom or whatnot? It's the same type of thought process. But if you take that money and you put it into a rental property right now, you have certain tax savings that are like super urgent that get to happen if you close on the house by December 31st. All right. So those tax savings that I was just sharing with you, those things that I love, the write-off of the interest expense, right? Even the write-off of the depreciation that I was talking about, those are things that are prorated as long as you own that home in that year, which makes sense, right? But there are some things that you get to write off that are not prorated, which means that you get to take that expense as if you owned it for the entire year. You get the full value of the write-off in this year, but you have to close by the end of the year. And this is why you hear CPAs saying, hey, listen, buy some rental properties before the end of the year to get more write-offs, to get some write-offs. You get all these write-offs all the time, but there's very few that you don't prorate. You just get to take the full value of the write-off by the end of the year. And that's why we're hosting the show on November 1st here, talking about this, it's because many times it takes, 45 days, 60 days to close on the home, depending on how long it takes for the lender, the lending process to happen. Or if you're sitting on cash, let's say you've got that bonus, or you're looking at your money in the stock market and saying, I don't really like the way this is looking for next year. You can pull that money, put it into a rental property, and then get these tax savings that I'm going to share with you right now. So in addition to all the ones that happen on a prorated basis, here's some things that you get to write off the full value as long as you close December 31st. First one is closing costs. And closing costs, even as I think about this message, which we share every year, closing costs this year and the tax savings component this year is even more powerful. And it's because closing costs are more today than they were a year ago, because usually closing costs are a percentage of the purchase price of the home. So, Pablo, has homes gone up in value over the last 2 years?
Homes have gone up in value.
Right. So as homes have gone up more in value, the value of the write-off of closing costs is also higher today, which means if you can rally your decision and get it done by December 31st, it's a bigger impact there. What we're also seeing, and we talk about this on our Thursday shows, the property of the week, our closing costs that we're reflecting are even higher on a percentage basis than what they've been in the past. And this is because we're counting on the buy down of the rate, right? Rates right now will be over 7, but if you look at our evaluations, they're 6.25. And the reason is because the buy down of that rate is a closing cost, right? That gets your rate down, that makes your cash flow positive, all those good things. Well, now closing costs are even more substantial to do that. Still makes sense to do, but if you're going to do it, now it makes even more sense for you to rally that decision around getting it closed by December 31st.
Because you get that cash back quicker on your tax return.
Exactly. That's what we are searching. Tax savings only matter because they save you on taxes. And as early as you can do it, it's more and more impactful.
So the spread of cash out to cash in is shorter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
So whereas, it might have been about maybe $5,000 or so on closing costs for a typical property a year ago, now it's about $11,000 on an average property. So, and then think about this, if you've got multiple properties that you wanted to purchase maybe the end of this year and maybe in the beginning of next year, you can make a decision today to put those properties under contract, buy them by the end of this year, and get $11,000 on average of a write-off from closing costs, call it times 3.
Yep.
And get all of your purchases that you were going to do next year done, right? Now that's $33,000 of write-offs that you would have either to write off income this year. Maybe you have other properties in other markets and, maybe they had a tremendous amount of income. Maybe you own them free and clear in other markets and you need an income you need to offset. $33,000 of expenses might go to offset those. And this is the type of tax strategy you could put into play before the end of the year to really move the needle.
If you have properties free and clear in another market, couldn't you refinance those properties and buy like another property or two and then have write-offs off of refinancing money that you don't pay taxes on and then even further lower your tax base?
Yeah, you definitely do that. You definitely do. I will say though, that in this environment right now, people are not rushing out to refinance.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's from a returns perspective, we could probably work the numbers and my team would be happy to sit down with anybody and talk through the pros and cons there, because at the end of the day, you're going to borrow money for, call it 6 or 7%, and you're going to be able to earn a return that's higher than 6 or 7%. So there's value to what you're saying, but it's a decision. It's a more complicated decision today to do that than a year ago.
That
makes sense. What I mean?
That makes sense. Okay. So at the end of the day, closing something by the end of the year, like if I put a property on the contract on December 30th versus January 1st, then my speed to money back based on this like tax benefit that we talk about as a profit center, you lower the spread of time that cash flow is out. Rental properties as a asset class right now versus where else are you going to invest in by end of year period is a really, really good idea. And they come with all these extra tax benefits that, like you said, most of the time you would have to prorate something. But if you do something December 30th, it counts as if it was all year long.
Entire year.
You get the whole benefit.
Yep. Two more things just to think about.
Yeah.
In the same vein, you get
and then we're going to go into questions. Just using the questions.
I know. I'll get through this really quickly. So closing costs are the big one to think about, but other things. So property taxes, right? Property tax bills come out this year, September, October, November timeframe, usually depending on what part of the country you're in. right? And then they give you like 3 or 4 months typically to be able to pay those things, right? You can make the decision to pay those property taxes this year and get the full write-off. I mean, that makes a ton of sense from a number of perspectives, because usually the sooner you pay them, the greater the discount the city will give you for paying them. And then you also get the write-off perspective if you do it before December 31st. So keep that in mind. Now, for all of you who have conventionally financed properties, the vast majority of you have your property taxes paid for as a part of your escrows with your lender. So that's already taken care of for you. Nothing for you to do there. This would be for folks that have purchases that are cash purchases or finance purchases that it's not escrowed for you. So no caveat there. But something else, a large percentage of our clients have homes that have HOAs, small HOAs, but they're HOAs. You can make the decision to pay your HOA fees. Don't pay them monthly for all of next year. You could pay them all December 31st for next year. Get the full value of the write-off this year. Then you don't have the monthly HOA fees next year, and you get the full value of the write-off this year, which is better than getting the value of the write-off next year.
Love that. Okay, cool. So that is you own a property right now. You're thinking about going into next year, and you're just like, you know what? I had a pretty good year this year. Next year is probably going to be a less good year because recession or whatever. So I want to just take my write-offs this year. Pay that down.
I would say it's regardless of did you have a good year or bad year, regardless of how you think next year is going to be this year. This strategy that I'm sharing with you, it's something we do every single year at JWB.
Okay.
We pay our HOAs by the end of December 31st, because we know that that's an expense that's going to happen next year. You might as well get the write-off this year and pay less taxes this year.
Cool. Love it. All right, cool. We are going to jam through a bunch of questions here. This is awesome, GC. Your money moves at the end of the year drew a lot of interest. So Dean Curry asks, are there any write-offs for lending money for JWB as a private money lender?
Dean, great question. The answer is no. So private money lending does not come with tax advantages. Rental property investing, owning the asset, is where those tax advantages come into play.
There you go. Still a better place to put money than the stock market or bonds or whatever. Just no tax write-offs.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Catherine Dobson. Catherine, welcome to the show.
New name?
I think that's a new name. New name. All right, Catherine. Welcome to the show, Catherine. I love it. Asks, are there additional write-offs for STRs? And Pablo asks, I have a friend that doesn't know what an STR is. Asking for a friend. What's it?
Short-term rental.
Short-term rental.
You're largely going to be the same incredible set of write-offs for short-term rentals as long-term rentals. Nothing comes to my mind as being different there. So I think you're in a good spot either way.
So same stuff. You can take that capital depreciation. You can take the depreciation expense. You can pay HOAs ahead of time. You can do all that stuff. Cool.
Absolutely.
Interest, closing costs, all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Cool. Maria Lazo. Maria, welcome back to the show. Remember
Maria? Remember mom came to the
first meetup. Maria's an OG out here. Maria asks, can you guys recommend a CPA that is savvy in real estate write-offs in Jacksonville?
Sure. Maria, just hit up Madison here, and then we'll connect with you offline and give you a good recommendation.
Cool. All right, Madison, let her know. Anonymous Attendee asks the question, can you please talk about cost segregation studies and the type of situations where this strategy would be utilized?
Yes. So cost segregation, this person loves tax write-offs like I love tax savings and write-offs, because cost segregation is taking what I just talked to you about and putting it on steroids. And you know how I just talked about how the IRS gives you a certain set of, like a certain schedule to depreciate the value of the building. This individual is saying, well, can we do cost segregation? So cost segregation says, instead of just taking this flat line approach of 27 and a half years to depreciate the building, what the IRS also allows you to do is to take certain components of the building and to depreciate them faster. So like if you could depreciate over, 5 years, that would give you more write-offs this year than if you depreciate over 27 and a half. And that is all very well and good. That is possible. The challenge is how much time, money, energy does it take to do a cost segregation study for one single family home? And so we do not do cost segregation studies on the rental properties that I own. And I have 300 of them. We don't do individual cost segregation studies because the numbers just don't pencil out, right? The tax savings that we would get from doing a cost segregation study on an individual single family rental home do not justify the expense and the work that would go in to getting said tax savings. Cost segregation comes into play when you have bigger buildings, when you have more uniform buildings, so
Mhm.
like apartment complexes, commercial buildings, things of that nature, that's when cost segregation comes into play. We do cost segregation studies for our big commercial buildings,
Mhm.
right? So we have a 12,000 square foot office here.
Yeah.
We've done cost segregation studies on this, right? The building that we'll be moving into in downtown Jacksonville next year is going to be 72,000 square feet. Definitely doing cost segregation studies
Got it.
there, but not on single family rental properties.
There you go. Good stuff. Great question. I had a question here in the chat that I don't want to lose because I think it's good. Kelly Barenbaum asks, in your experience, how do recessions impact potential vacancy and rental rates?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Kelly. I think there's a lot of data and perspective that we can give for recessions and rental rates. I've been hearing a lot on the show, people saying, hey, our rent's going down, our rent's going down, our rent's going down, almost like that's like a normal thing.
Mhm.
Like I wanted to share with everybody, there hasn't been 1 year where rents have gone down nationally. And
Okay.
that's including the Great Recession. Like rents going down is extremely, extremely rare. I mean, that's even more rare than home prices going down. In Jacksonville, the only time that home prices have gone down for as long as we've been tracking home prices has been the Great Recession when they dropped a lot.
Mhm.
So even during the Great Recessions, rents stayed consistent.
Interesting.
Right? So it's really rare for rents to be going down. In recessions, rents actually perform very well.
Okay.
Okay. It is just like home prices, like we've talked about. Rents continue to go up even in recessions. And I can even give you some more data. I think I'm going to write that down to come prepared with even better data on how rents have performed in past recessions. You know, we did it for home prices.
Yeah.
I think
I'd be
I'm going
real
to do
interested in
that. I think I'm going to do that. Right. Yeah. That'd be great.
What about vacancies though, GC? Do vacancies go up?
You know, vacancies can certainly go up. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Vacancies can go up when you have job losses, right? That can happen. You know, the big thing you got to be concerned about, and this is why you have to choose your market wisely, is you have to choose a market where just if there's one supplier of jobs, you know, and they do not run their business well enough to withstand a recession and they pack up and leave and they take a substantial amount of jobs with them, that's really what you want to avoid. That's why when you choose your markets, you want to have at least 1 million people living in that MSA.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that's an easy way for you to think about, okay, well, if you've got 1 million people there, you've probably got major employers, you've probably got Fortune 500 companies, of which Jacksonville has 4 Fortune 500 companies in Jacksonville. Part of the reason why we love Jacksonville is because it is economically diverse,
Mm-hmm.
and you want some of that to withstand what a recession could do to a certain part of the economy or a region. So, but yeah, to your point, vacancies can go up. I mean, you know, this isn't foolproof. The reality though, is that when you think about what's about to happen, the recession is coming. We haven't seen job losses yet. Job losses will be coming
Mm-hmm.
at some point. You know, we're thinking largely probably middle of next year is when I think a lot of this pain is going to be realized.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to see unemployment go up. Our unemployment right now is historically low. So the thesis here of why you would invest in a rental property and expect that you'll be able to keep it occupied is because our economy can withstand a little bit more unemployment, right? It's like 3% right now, right? We are still a really, really solid economy and job market when you have unemployment at 4%, 5%, even 6% is not unheard of.
Yep.
So if you like that way of thinking, that you are still going to be able to keep your homes occupied, still going to be able to collect rents that are continuing to go up in the face of a recession, that should be your thesis.
Yep.
Is that there is pain coming, rental properties are built to withstand it better than others.
I would also assume that it's the 1 million metro area. I would assume you're also mitigating risk if you are in a market like Jacksonville that has all these favorable tailwinds, right? Has been growing really rapidly, is below the average cost of living. So like if I lose my job in New York, what am I going to do?
Right.
You know, moving to Jacksonville is actually a really, really good option. And you'd still lower your cost of living and like hedge for risk and do that, right? Warm climate, lower cost of living than most of these other markets, still a lot of economic opportunity, whether you're working remote on Zoom or local. I would assume that also hedges risk as well.
Yeah, it comes down to supply and demand. And what you're talking about is demand,
Yeah.
right? If you want to mitigate the risk, if you're thinking, hey, this asset class makes sense for me, how do I mitigate risk? Mitigating risk is something you can do by investing in a market where there's significant population growth and then sustained population growth going forward, which is kind of what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
That leads to demand for housing. That helps to, keep prices constant or rising, and helps to balance supply.
Speaking of vacancy, we got a couple questions here from, I don't know if it's the same person or two different anonymous sets and days, but if your property is vacant and you've paid off the mortgage, you've been paying the mortgage for the past couple months, is that a write-off as well? So vacancy costs, are those write-offs?
Yeah, absolutely. The interest that you pay on your mortgage, regardless if the home is rented or not, is a write-off.
Okay, but not the rest of the mortgage.
Correct. The principal amount, the principal payment is never a write-off, regardless if your house is occupied or not.
That's not a write-off, but that still lowers the tax basis from the revenue, because if you're not collecting rent, then you're getting less revenue, so you're getting less taxed on the overall. But it's not a write-off.
I don't know. Oh, I wasn't following that one.
So you're saying let's call it $12,000 in revenue because you have $1,000 a month in rent.
Okay.
You didn't collect for 2 months, so now you're only getting taxed on $10,000 a month in revenue minus all the write-offs.
Yes. What you're saying is you're only taxed on the revenue you collect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
So that would be on the income side. On the expense side, you have to pay your mortgage payment no matter what.
Yeah.
So you are always paying that mortgage payment every single month, regardless of rental status, if it's occupied or not. And you're always able to write off the interest expense of that mortgage payment on the expense side.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Raj has another question. Are there any lending products for someone having 10 mortgages already?
Raj, great question. And the answer is yes. Please reach out to our team and happy to go through those options with you. There's a lot more options today than there were in the past. I mean, even years ago, when we would talk to clients, it was a big hurdle to overcome lending for folks that have more than 10 mortgages, but it's not nearly as much of a hurdle now.
Cool. Maria Lazo's got another question. If there are multiple partners in a real estate investment, does the depreciation write-off value get divided between the partners, or does each member get the full depreciation value for their personal taxes?
I'm not a CPA, so I would definitely encourage you to talk to somebody who has more professional knowledge in terms of write-offs than I do, but this is my perspective. I'm pretty sure that it'd get divided between the partners on that one.
Okay, there you go. And last question here from a Not Your Average Guest. Again, just so everybody knows, we sent out new text reminders now, and if you just click the link on it, you show up as a Not Your Average Guest. So it's actually a interesting thing to see that we had like 3 or 4 at one point, and now we got 2. So it's cool to see that people are clicking into those texts.
And if you've got that, I think there's probably a way for you to change the name on this.
If you put your name in, if you go to the participants, you can change your own name, but no big deal. Just, I think I love seeing the Not Your Average Guest because we're marketers, right?
I know, it's great.
Any solo 401k pointers, GC?
Yeah, solo 401k is a term that not many people are aware of. This is an incredible vehicle. If you are a solopreneur, right? If you are an individual owner of a business, or it might be with your spouse, again, you'll want to double check on that. But basically, if it's just you out there and you've built this business, you have this opportunity to create a retirement vehicle that has even more advantages, even bigger contribution limits than what a standard 401k would have or an IRA would have, to the tune of like your contribution limits for your standard, 401k, probably something like $18,000, $19,000. That's the most that you could put in and contribute each year. For an IRA, I think it's like $6,000, somewhere around there. That's the most that you can contribute. Fun fact, you can do both of those, by the way. People think they only have a 401k, they can't do an IRA. Okay. You can do both.
That's just a fun fact.
Yeah, just talked with a friend who didn't know that. And so, so you can do both. But a solo 401k is about the best vehicle that I've heard of, where you can put upwards of $52,000, I believe, and contribute that into your solo 401k. And, you ask the question like, listen, with all of these tax savings, should I still contribute to my IRAs or to my solo 401ks? When we're talking about tax savings only, the goal here is to get to a state where, just from a tax savings perspective, you get the advantage that you get in a IRA or a 401k or a solo 401k, right? What we're doing is we're deferring taxes, right? In a solo 401k or an IRA or a 401k, all you're doing is you're putting it, you're making contributions today, right? You're paying taxes on it today so that you don't have to pay, excuse me. You are doing it pre-tax today. You're putting money in today, you're saving on the taxes so that you are actually going to pay them later on.
Okay.
So you're deferring taxes. There are also other qualified plans where you can pay the taxes up front, but we're not talking about that. So you're just trying to get to a place where you're deferring taxes. So I would definitely encourage you to make your contributions when it comes to things like your 401ks or your IRAs or your solo 401ks, because that's like the end goal here is you get to a place where you're deferring your taxes. You don't have to pay the taxes on them when you put them in. You don't have to pay the taxes on them as they grow and grow and grow. And then when you're 59 and a half, eventually you can make the choices to get more of those distributions and pay the taxes later. So all these wonderful tax savings things that we're talking about right now can be done outside of your retirement accounts. Inside your retirement account, you can also buy rental properties, which might be the right thing for you. But I would certainly encourage you, even if you're not putting money in real estate right now, contribute to your 401ks. That's going to pay you later. Now, what you do with that investment, once you put the money in there, that's what I would highly encourage you to look outside of the stock market right now.
It's funny you asked, because the person that asked that question said, sorry, actually asking about investing with you by year end, your 401k. So everybody's just got a solo 401k. Sorry. GC loves to talk, everybody. We know this. Why don't you give our Not Your Average Guest kind of like, are there any pointers, something that he or she should
Yes. Investing in rental properties can be done definitely before the end of the year. Private lending can be done from your solo 401k or from your 401k or from your IRA. All of these are great options. So if you haven't reached out to my team yet, please do that. And time's really of the essence, guys. I always tell you when there's something that's urgent and when it's not urgent. This is really urgent, especially if you're thinking about buying rental properties, because by the end of the year, it's December 31st. You got to get it done.
As far as tips go, though, right? Like I remember when I was really thinking about investing with my IRA, you gave me a couple of tips, right? Like you need to have enough money to buy the property and cover reasonable expenses because you can't commingle funds. Can you give our guests a rundown of that? Yeah. Maybe they weren't here before.
Absolutely. So when you're investing in your IRA, it's a little bit of a different ballgame. That's why this conversation we need to have is so critical. The difference between investing in your IRA or your retirement accounts versus your non-qualified plans. Qualified means retirement accounts. Non-qualified means not retirement accounts. Is that when you're investing in your retirement accounts, the money that you have in that retirement account has to pay for the property. And if you have more expenses than money that you have in your bank account in that retirement account, you can't just willy-nilly just contribute more. You can't just take it from your personal bank account to cover it. So you've got to have the right amount of reserves going into it, because that's a problem that JWB can't solve for you. Like if you get into an investment property and you don't have enough reserves in your retirement account and a $4,000 property turn comes your way, which guess what? That can happen when you own rental properties and you only have $2,000 in that account and you've maximized your contributions up to that point. Like there's nothing we can do. And so we do as much as we can to talk about that upfront, because that is a terrible situation that I never want a client to be put in, where they have a problem that we can't solve. So reserves are important. If you're thinking about using debt in your retirement accounts, that's also something we can do and work with you on. But reserves are even more important there as well, because you've got those debt costs. So all of these things are part of our onboarding process. So I would highly encourage you to reach out to our team. If you happen to be a current client and you have some of those questions, just reach out to your portfolio manager and we'll be able to put a great plan together for you.
And if not, go to chatwithjwb.com.
There you go.
All right, cool. That was end of the year money moves. That was a lot of fun, man. I liked it. We had a really good turnout, right? Like I just really want to thank the community for just awesome questions. The chat was on fire the whole time. The Q&A was on fire. We had a bunch of folks that we don't see all the time, like Maria and other people check back in, new folks that joined in. So really just never goes unnoticed that you're spending an hour of your day. We had 50 plus people on today, middle of a Tuesday. It just blows my mind that you come here and spend this time with us. Make this easy for us. Really appreciate it. And you make it a lot of fun. So thank you for coming, GC. I thought you did a pretty good job explaining all that stuff.
Thanks, man. It's just, it's fun to be here, just doing what you love. I think, for the first 5 minutes before every single show, just so everybody knows, I go to Pablo and I'm like, what are we talking about today? I did that today. And obviously we prepare a lot in advance and all that good stuff. But there's always 5 minutes right before you, anytime you do a show and you're like, are people really going to listen?
Yeah.
Is anybody going to show up?
Yeah.
Are people going to be like excited to talk about this? And when we see the chat lit up like it is, and we see all of you really making friendships and connections through the chat and asking such great questions, it just gives us a really good feeling. And that's all you guys. So thank you guys for making this such an awesome part of our jobs. We appreciate it.
Real quick, GC, because Kelly just put this here at the end and then the chat blew up. Have you published proposed reserve targets for like the types of reserves that you need to have in a 401k or if you're investing in the properties?
You know, I'm sure that we have. I don't know exactly what that is off the top of my head, just because I got a lot of numbers in my head right now. So let me encourage you to reach out to my team. We're super happy to give you that information, no matter if you buy with us or not, but just reach out, chat with jwb.com, or you can send an email to info@jwb.com.
Other great place to go is go to our Facebook group, right?
Yeah,
jwbfacebookgroup.com. Hang out there throughout the week. You can ask about reserve numbers from all of our investors, right? There's almost 4,000 people in there. And I think we can talk about reserve numbers in the JWB week. On Thursday, we do this again live at 12:30. We actually go into a property and get into like specifics of the transaction and the deal and the investment. So if you want to come by, you think you'll be game ready with some reserve numbers on Thursday, GC?
Got it. Just making me better every single time. I love it. I got that, and I got rental rates and recessions.
I love that. I love that. So if you want to make smart end of the year money moves, you can't think like an average investor. See you next time.
See you, everybody.